we go. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. I want to introduce Shara Senderoff. She is the president and partner of Music Technology Investment Fund, Raised in Space, which is co-founded by music giants Zach Katz, Scooter Braun, and Replex. She was named one of Forbes 30 Under 30, Rolling Stone's Future 25, Billboard's Women in Music, and Fast Company's 100 Most Creative People in the Business. Senderoff's reputation for visionary strategy and foresight, both technically and creatively, has commanded both attention and praise throughout the entertainment industry. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Shara and have her give you a bit more about herself.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you. And a bit more about myself. Let's see. I love walking on the beach. I'm really into sports. I would say, let's see. So here's what I do. So it's really hard people kind of look at my career, which I actually think is really, really relevant for this conversation. People will look at my career and have no idea or understanding of what I actually do. And I was actually telling someone the other day a story where, and I don't think it's like this now, but when I was a few years out of college and I was kind of making my first pivot from film and TV into technology, people were like, well, it's going to be confusing if you like jump industries, because then when you go to get another job, someone's going to look at your resume and they're going to have no clue what you do. And I thought how insane that was and how it just didn't make any sense to me. And I really vowed at that point to never have to have a resume again. And I haven't. And I think that that's the best thing. I've never had a resume since I graduated college. And I do that. And I've done that because I've been able to kind of take one step and go to the next thing and utilize multiple different industries and find a way to combine them together in one and find sort of an array of a skill set that other people don't have. And so I think that your uniqueness truly defines what you become and the opportunities that come to you. And so I would say that when I look at my story and my journey, it's been an amalgamation of a lot of fun. And I think that that's the best part is, and especially for this audience, is to really remind everyone that if you follow your heart and if you follow your passion, you never work a day in your life, and anything that you could dream of doing, you will be able to do, and the doors will just fly open for you. If you simply have that belief and that attitude that it will come, it will. And so I think that without getting into the specifics of my story, I think that if I were to look back at what my career is and were to define it to anybody else, I would say I have a lot of fun and I love what I do. And I think what else could we ask for?
I absolutely love that. I definitely very much agree. And also think about how insane it is to say, you can't go between entertainment to technology when now every company is a technology
Everything
company.
is blurred. Right. And it's amazing. And I knew it would happen this way, but it's a whole new ball game for anyone coming up in entertainment or technology. You just have so much at your fingertips that I often find myself, and it's hard to imagine. Like I remember being in college, graduating from college yesterday. I'm like, where did all these years go? I feel like it was just literally just yesterday that I was like, oh, what's going to be my first thing? And now there's so much more. It's just limitless what you can do. And now I kind of sit here being like, I hope I have more time because there's so much that I want to do and execute on and that's why I wake up every day in just so much gratitude of where I get to be and how I've gotten here, because we're really fortunate to have so much at our fingertips. Mm-hmm. If we're lazy, it doesn't really work. But if you're not lazy, then you can go do anything you want.
Sky's the limit then, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let's step back then. You're talking about college a bit. So college till now, what did that look like? How did you get to where you are now, essentially? And like, what is now? What does your day-to-day actually looks like? I'm sure it varies wildly, and I'm sure it involves lots of meetings, but what does it actually look like? What are you doing, and how'd you get there?
So I run a venture capital fund, which is that's the simplest way to describe it. It's called Raised in Space. I partnered with Scooter Braun to launch it. And our vision was really, how do we invest in music technology companies that can accelerate and raise the value of the music industry. And what that really meant is finding solutions to problems. So in my view, and in anything that I invest into today, I'm not really looking for nice to haves. I'm looking for things that dramatically will shift the world, whether that be the behavior of someone, whether that be a revenue stream, whether that be a new way that we look at data. It's about the more we can understand and the more awareness we have of elements within an ecosystem of business, the more we can come up with the missing holes and figure out how to fill them. And so effectively what I do is I just solve problems. I look for entrepreneurs that have heart and that have a why and that are doing something because they want to solve a problem that affected them. You very rarely come across the entrepreneur that's like, you know what, I just started this because I thought it would be nice to have. Everyone truly has a reason why they came up with an idea. And I really try to push entrepreneurs to remember their mission and their why, because you can't motivate yourself to build something, to go through the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to build a company if you don't have a true mission as to why you're doing it. And so I look at a lot of products for, do we need them? What is the timing? Is the music industry or entertainment industry more broadly ready for something like this? Are they going to mobilize around it? Are they going to stand in its way because they just don't want to change their behavior and their processes? And so that's kind of how I analyze a lot of the companies I look at. And then I make investments into a wide range of companies, from sort of Series A, sometimes their first check, all the way up until they're in sort of a Series A, Series B state. And then I focus on actively helping them. So a big part of my mission and kind of who I am is to be a reason why something goes somewhere and not just a winner because it went somewhere. And so my mission as an investor is to make sure that I invest in companies that I believe I can transform, and that I can help entrepreneurs when they get caught in any version of a problem to be able to navigate their way out. Because I was an entrepreneur. I had a tech company along my journey that I sold, and I lacked a lot of the guidance that I needed at times. And it can feel really lonely and it can feel really challenging, and you're never going to know the answer to everything. So I prefer to sort of stand as a reminder to my entrepreneurs that I invest into, that knowing that you're not going to know everything, or anything for that matter, is really actually the secret.
Absolutely. I think that's really key. That idea and that concept of imposter syndrome is constantly present, in that idea that not everyone knows what they're doing. Most people don't know what they're doing. I think really helps people dissuade that in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So like thinking about this, you're talking about your first company that you started and you ended up selling.
Yeah.
You pivoted a lot in your career. Your company that you talked about before, that was around hiring. You moved into artist management. You're now in investing. What was the glue that held it all together? Not the idea that you're changing industries, but much more around the idea of like what skills you take with you from each one that helped you be better as you progress through your career.
I think that it's interesting because I went to film school, and that was, I grew up with a video camera on my hand. I shot all my friends in high school, all of our crazy parties, all of our adventures, everything. And I would make these sort of recap videos of what we did. And to me, they were like these mini short films of our life. And I've always been a storyteller. And that has been a through line for me, has been telling stories in whatever format best suits where I'm at and what I'm doing. And I think that is truly the heart of what's important to me, which is connecting with humans and understanding why someone is the way they are and why they do what they do. And that sort of emotional interest and sort of emotional kind of intrigue that I have in other people, more around sort of like where they're at and why, and what have they gone through, and how have they been raised, and what have they experienced, and what is their pain and what is their joy, I think really gives you a book on people. And I think for me, I've always wanted to share what makes people great. And that truly is a through line. If you look at my entire career, I started in film and TV. I had a really fortunate kind of early journey into the film business. I sold a script as an assistant. One of my really close friends and I ended up selling a movie to Steven Spielberg. We had just a really cool run of being 21, 22 years old and selling movies that we could produce at a really early age. And from there, I had a really interesting run as a young film executive, had the great fortune of producing studio movies that were anywhere from $30 million to $200 million. And I was able to look at it a bit naively, but also with a critical eye to say that, like, if the movie business continued functioning the way it did at that time, where we were relying on a movie coming out at the box office one weekend for how it made its money. There was no real on-demand video, streaming wasn't here yet. There was no other way to really generate as much revenue. Now we have a lot of other options with all of the Hulu's, Netflix's, all the streaming platforms, but that wasn't there at the time. So I started pushing pushing my boss around how could we distribute content digitally that allows us to better understand who the audiences are that are watching our stories, and find other business models other than just spending $50 million on a movie and premiering it for 3 days in a movie theater. And that kind of led me into early days digital media, which they were calling it really new media, which is crazy because it's not that long ago and it feels like a dinosaur sounding term. But the idea I had was really, how could we reach more people, and how could we build value in IP that then we could then bring back to film and TV. And that's kind of always been my MO, is just question everything. Because if you question how we're doing something, then you're going to find a better way to do it, or you're going to start to just think out of the box about what you're doing. I think a lot of people become really monotonous in their careers, and it's just, they wake up every day, they go to work, they crunch the numbers, they do whatever it is that they do. And I think that that would not work for me. I can't do that. And that's why I do so many things now, because my mind needs to go to so many things and allow everything to rise up together. But so from there, and I sort of went into a bunch of digital, and then I ended up needing to use technology to find the data and insights around who my audiences were that were watching the digital content I was creating. And that really led me into an obsession with data and analytics, which will bring us perfectly back to where we're at here. But I really started to get obsessed with the fact that if you knew things about your audiences, your decisions would be made for you. You would never be in a position where it was, well, what do I do here? It's like, well, the data says this, so go follow the data, test it out, and you'll know if it works. And so I ended up sort of building and getting really detail oriented into metadata. And that led me to launch a startup called Intern Sushi, which was effectively a reinvention of LinkedIn for a younger demographic, because I wanted to create an opportunity for interns to tell their stories. Because to have a resume with just some nonsense written on it, that wasn't and shouldn't define who you were. And I didn't want that to define me when I was in college applying for internships. So I set out to create a platform that would allow interns to tell their stories via images, videos, anything creative. And then I worked the back end of the platform to really architect the metadata in a way that would allow for companies to find the right people. That was really what my mission was. Now, I learned as I built the company that it's really hard to do that, because you can't quantify human intelligence and emotional intelligence in an algorithm. And I still believe that to this day, which is a big through line in a lot of the stuff I do now with machine learning and computer vision and data and insights around the music business. But so I ended up selling that company and consulting for a lot of record labels, because a lot of the music industry jumped on board Intern Sushi, everyone from artists to managers to record labels to publishing companies to live touring companies, you name it, they were on Intern Sushi. And so I found myself in this place where I was like, okay, well, I have access to the music business. So what are they up to? What problems do they need to solve? And the next thing I knew, I was consulting for a lot of really high level CEOs and chairmen of a lot of the major labels and a lot of big artist managers, And I was really focusing with them on scaling audience and how do they use data to understand where and how to spend their money. And so that's kind of my version of data science around the music industry. I get into a lot of conversations with people who will say like, oh, well, we can use data science to predict what the next hit is. And I don't believe that that's where it should be used. I believe it should be used to better understand how to take a hit that comes from the heart of a musician or a songwriter or a producer, and then apply data to get that to more people. And so that's a lot of really what I do today. All of that I just kind of ran through has a part in what I do now.
That's amazing. I love this story. I also chuckled when you said everyone wants to use data science to predict the hit. And I've mentored and advised lots of people in the space, and people always come to me and say, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do." And I always say back to them, "Yes, even if you told me exactly the algorithm and the exact way for you to write a hit, I promise you, if you hand it to an artist, they're not going to care." And
Yeah.
that bit of the switch when it
Yeah.
reminds people that this is a creative industry and it's not just math that matters is something that I think is really important for people to take with them.
Yeah.
In addition, just listening to what your story, like the story that you're telling, that I think is really interesting is storytelling, but also sharing what makes people great. So like the best stories in the world are the ones where you're highlighting incredible
Yeah.
individuals, right? And then questioning that, getting under the surface is like how that happened, why that happened, how they are where they are, and that curiosity. And then I think the most important piece that people often miss is who cares about that story. And I think that data layer that you brought into it really talks about who actually cares about the story that you're trying to tell. And I think it's really interesting to kind of hear how your career has actually progressed through and bringing that all together again.
Yep.
So now you're at you're currently doing you're doing a lot actually. You're currently
Yeah.
doing Raise in Space. You're doing something gold as well. So something gold, let's switch a bit over there. You have the management component, you have creative, you have the ventures arm. So I think most people understand what artist managers do, but creative and ventures, what is that? What do you do there? What types of problems are you actually looking to solve on those projects?
So Something Gold is really sort of my holding company that holds everything else I do alongside investing. And it has a music management component. It has a talent management component. I kind of come in to architect journeys of people's career because that's kind of my mission, is help people reach their potential. And so Something Gold is actually from a song lyric of one of the artists that I manage, and the lyric in full is "turn it into something gold." And that's kind of really what I'm all about, which is take something and look at it for what it is, but more so look at it for what it can become and turn it into something gold. And so underneath ventures has a lot of companies that I angel invest in personally. I do a lot with a lot of my friends, and it's just a lot of creative sort of projects and companies that I advise are underneath Something Gold. Something Gold is really just whatever I want to do, I do it under that banner, because that banner thematically holds how I show up to a project that I do. And I think that that's one of the most important things when I look back at my career and where I am going as well, which is to be sort of to show up and reputationally have people respect me for what I bring to the table. And I always say that you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I also don't believe in the word smart. I don't believe anyone is more intelligent than anybody else. I believe that they just might have put in more hours to learn a particular area than someone else. So what I always say is like, show up in a way that you want other people to perceive you. And for me, it's being reliable. For me, it's being somebody that other people can learn from or hear another perspective from. And I think that that's what contributes to how we grow as people, is just being open to listening and learning from others and learning their stories. And to your point earlier about like telling a story that someone wants to hear, I would challenge that a little bit, because I think that telling a story that someone wants to hear a story that's authentic. So any story that is authentic, we can connect to, because we're beings of truth. We know and resonate and feel truth. And that's why with a lot of what's going on in the world, people are really kind of all over the place because we're in a misinformation kind of landscape right now. And that's not to take a side, it's all misinformation. And I think that that's really hard to be in because humans are built to find the truth and to understand, even though we'll never understand, we're built to try to comprehend, though our human mind is limited to what it can comprehend, but we're here to discover. And so when we're in a position where we can't, we feel ungrounded. And so I believe authentic stories help ground humans, and they help remind you of who you are, and they help you feel stability and emotion and to connect. And I think that's what's so important about storytelling, is that as long as it comes from an authentic place, someone will want to hear it. And so I think that's where I would say, and I always say to anyone that reaches out to me for advice on their career, I always say, just be you. And that's hard. It's hard to be you because a lot of times we don't know, we're on this planet to discover who we are. So some of us get there when we're early. I was really fortunate to really at a very young age, just be very comfortable in my own skin and be confident in what my purpose was and what I was supposed to do. But I empathize with the fact that that happens to people at different ages and different moments in their lives. So I think the constant reminder is like, sit with yourself and try to think about who you are always, because that will lead you to really incredible things.
Absolutely. I think it's very tough for some people to know kind of who they are. And I think another area that's really challenging is sometimes you don't know what the options are. You don't know that you're allowed to do things.
Yep.
Talk to me about that a bit. So basically,
Yep.
how did you feel like you had the permission to do all the things you did, to start your company, to do what you're doing now? Like, did you feel like someone told you? Did you have mentors, advisors, or you just like, I want to do something different than what I'm currently seeing as options for myself?
I feel unbelievably fortunate that I have always been someone who gave myself permission. And I think that now I try to inspire others to know that you're the only person who has to give you permission. Nobody else has any control over you. They do not have any right to tell you what you can and can't do. And you can probably gather from my energy, but I'm a big manifester. I literally just believe that anything is possible. And so for that doesn't mean I accomplish everything the way I want to accomplish it, but I certainly go out and try without fear, because the worst that can happen is it doesn't work. And so when you remember that, then you can think, well, why wouldn't I try? And it's easier said than done, but it's about putting yourself in a position to think for yourself and to think about how you want to feel. And that's what I think, like in sort of career advice and in a lot of panels that I used to listen to when I was coming up, to look for mentors or to like look for that magic. What is someone going to say that's going to help my career trajectory? There wasn't a lot out there, and there's not a lot out there because the reality is everyone's reality is unique to them. And everyone's story is going to be unique. And I think the best thing to remember is that no one can give you permission. And that the more you try, the more you learn and the more you see. If you're sitting at home and you're not out at an internship or you're not applying to a job and not getting it, then you don't know what it feels like to apply to something and not get it, because you're just holding yourself back. So it's better to know, because then you can make another decision around what you want to do next, because you'll feel, well, I didn't really like how that felt. So I didn't love showing up to do that every day. So I shouldn't do that moving forward. And so I always really say, like, try to just pay attention to how you feel, because you'll know when you're in an environment where you feel inspired, you feel creative, you feel respected. And those are the launch pads that send people off to do just some of the most amazing things for this world, is when they're made to be able to fly. And I think a lot of people don't pay attention to when it doesn't feel right. They know, like, oh, I'm not enjoying this, but they don't put two and two together, which is, if you're not feeling great, leave. get into a different environment, apply to a different job. And sure, there's going to be change and it's going to not be easy. But once you get into a place that is right for you, then nothing will stop you. Just everything will manifest and everything you dream will come.
Absolutely. I've changed countries twice now, and when I left the country, people were like, "Oh, you're so brave," and I'm like, "No, if it doesn't work out, they haven't taken my passport. I can just go home." And I
Yep.
think that concept of
Yeah.
like just be willing to fail. They say the best skateboarders, the best athletes are not ones that never fall off their skateboard, or the ones that fall off their skateboard constantly because they're willing to go big to
Yep.
see, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't work out, but you're never going to be incredible if you're not willing to take huge risk, which
Yep.
probably goes back to you working in venture capital as well, as this idea of like taking risks because there's a potential big payoff, there's a big value there. So I would actually love to talk about raise in space a bit. So obviously, you're a venture capitalist, so obviously one component of what you're doing is aiming to generate revenue, make money. But
Yep.
one of your big key points is around increasing the value of music. Talk to me about what value of music is beyond monetarily. What does the value of music kind of look like for you and for the company?
So I think it's interesting, and we're at a really interesting place with sort of the rise or the birth of Web3, which is that for anyone who doesn't know, Web3 is really sort of the future of the internet. It's a more decentralized, more transparent, more open place where things can effectively be owned and monetized differently. And so raising the value of music means raising the value of music. So think about like the Napster days where we were literally like pirating and stealing music, and the creators behind that music were not benefiting at all. And when we look at even the business model that the music industry is built on today, which is predominantly around streaming, yet the vast majority of artists are making no money from streaming because the price per stream and the revenue per stream is literally non-existent. So I look at raising the value of music as sort of how to reinvent the way creativity can thrive. And it can really just exist, because there's nothing worse than hearing the music artist who can't pay their bills and therefore they can't create music. And so that's kind of the underlying mission for me, which is create a new framework, introduce new revenue streams and new ways of monetizing music that can allow the whole business to grow outside of just streaming, but find many new revenue streams that artists of any walk of life, of any genre, of any financial status can participate in.
That makes lots of sense. If you think about at the start of COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs, and there was commentary around, oh, you should have had a more secure job, while everyone was also at home watching Netflix and listening to Spotify and consuming nothing, art, but don't see the value in art in terms of generating revenue. So
Right.
taking that and turning it on its head and thinking, hey, how do we actually make sure this is something that generates revenue, but also more importantly, just makes a living for artists, makes a living in a world where it feels that music has a place to thrive is absolutely incredibly important. Talk to me about Web 3.0 a bit. What are you most excited about? What, just get in there, get nerdy if you want. We have a nerdy crowd. What are you really amped about? What do you want? What are you like, oh, this is going to be the next big thing that you think people should be paying attention to?
So I'm a big NFT enthusiast, a personal collector, all the way over to investing in a lot of collections, and a lot of collections that will participate in metaverse environments. I think the metaverse has become a bit of a buzzword that is misunderstood. And really, the best way to understand what the metaverse is it's another layer of reality that we can build on. So I think the potential is just infinite for how we can experience creative. So right now, we're actually really in the metaverse. We're not even in remotely the same area. We're talking on a computer. We're seeing each other's video in real time. So when you appreciate technology, you can understand where we're heading and what the potential is. And that's to exist in immersive environments where you can interact with other humans and it as an avatar, as in AR and VR, and you can be immersed in new commerce in a totally different way. So we're going to see digital payments. We're going to obviously see the rise of digital collectibles with NFTs. And a lot of people are kind of spending a lot of time right now around, well, this is a new way for artists to make a lot of money. And I think that that's true, but this isn't about the cash grab. This isn't about just get in and go generate a few $1,000,000. For me, this is the same thing we've talked about this whole time. It's storytelling. What brand, what component of your brand as an artist do you want what do you have that you can sell? What do you have that you're going to commit to and continue to tell the story of? You can't just drop an NFT as an artist and expect that people buy it for $200, $300. That's more than they spend on coming to a concert in real life to see you. So if you're going to ask them to spend money on something digital, it better have a lot of access. It better have a lot of storytelling. It better have a lot of components that you're going to continue to increase the value of, or else why should a consumer buy it? And so what I love about Web3 is the focus on the value chain. And I always say to artists and on the other side, consumers, which is, why would you spend money to invest in this artist? And this artist, how are you going to spend to benefit your consumer and your fan? And so I think there's a lot, again, like we've also talked about this whole time, there's a lot of questions here. There's a new frontier of technology. There's a new frontier of our currency as we know it. This is the future of crypto. This is digital currency, the birth of digital currency. And that just creates endless business opportunity to figure out how things move, whether that be money or whether that be art. And so I think we're just in this place where I couldn't encourage everyone more to go look into what Web3 is, which is really all within the ecosystem of crypto, NFTs, metaverse environments, gaming, because it's the future of what our economy will look like over the next 10 years.
I think you made a lot of really interesting points there. One point that I think is lost on people often around this space is around the power of fans. So it feels like with Web 3.0, a lot of the power is shifting back where it becomes a relationship of, a many to many, or rather than a one to many that you currently see often where people are kind of broadcasting to you. What does this look like for the fan? Someone that is a diehard fan of an artist. What can the new web actually look like for that kind of relationship?
Yeah, I think the fan will just have so many other opportunities to connect to their favorite artists, to be able to experience music in different ways. So before sort of the rise of Web3, and even really right before COVID, we were really stuck traditionally, and I say this all the time, the music business was a 3-lane highway. Buy my music, buy my merch, buy the ticket to my show. And that was it. There was no other way to interact with your favorite artists or other places to find them. Now, what Web3 is doing is allowing for you to experience music, experience the artist brand in a completely different way. So you might be able to buy a digital collectible that you keep in your wallet, and they tease new music to you that way. There, you could show up to one of my portfolio companies called The Wave. They do virtual concerts. And so they've brought Bieber and The Weeknd and big virtual experiences where these artists are performing live, but you're experiencing it in a big visual effects virtual environment, which is just a totally different take on experiencing music. So I think that all of the new technology that's to come will just give us so many more opportunities to interact with the emotion of the music.
That's amazing to kind of think about what that might actually look like. And I also think a space that's really interesting about this is it also helps a lot with diversity and inclusion, because people aren't able to be in the physical locations, are able to still experience that like being surrounded by other people and all these other things that I think I'm hoping as we move to the quote, future, post-COVID world, that we don't forget that, some people were not able to interact in that way before and are looking for opportunities and options to be able to continue to do what we all were able to do for 2.5 years at this point, right?
That's actually my favorite part about Web3 is the path that it will take to oneness for humanity, which when I talk about that, a lot of people are like, how are you connecting the two? Well, I'm connecting the two because the larger mission for humanity is for us to connect with one another because we're all human. There's no skin color, there's no where we're from, there's no religion. It's we're human. You're human and I'm human. So there should be no barrier to our ability to connect whatsoever. It should have to do with nothing. We should be open-minded. I should look at you and say, where you have pain, I have pain. Where you have love, I have love. And that's humanity at its finest. And I think Web3 is going to shut a lot of that down, not overnight, but over the long run to allow everyone to just be connected as one, and to take a lot of the socio-political drama that has covered us over the last, well, forever, out of the picture eventually. And I know that sounds a bit hippie like, but I know it will happen.
I mean, you can think about the practical applications kind of outside of music. Imagine if when you submitted your resume, it was an avatar instead of you know, things like bias on resume submissions, you know, potentially gone, things like that. There's a lot of opportunities there that people aren't thinking about because they're only thinking about it as, oh, this is a cash grab. And once people get beyond, oh, this is a way to make money, to this is a practical application that will help and better people's lives, I think the perception of it will hopefully change and people will find the better, more uses for it.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So you talked a bit while we were going through this about some companies that you advise. You're also sitting on the advisory board of Audigent, which is a media company as well. There's some people, it's really hard, lots of conferences like this, you have a lot of good tips for people at entry level, but there's often not a lot of discussion about people that are midway into their career when they're probably thinking about, hey, I might want to join a board, or hey, I want to be an angel investor, or things like that. How did you get to that point? What did that look like? What kind of tips or advice would you give people that are kind of thinking about that for like next steps in their career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad you brought that up because I don't think it's talked about enough. But one of angel investing is a really interesting topic. Now, you have to obviously have somewhat of a financial stability to be able to do it. However, one of the things is really, really important to me is to be able to bring anyone into angel investing. And now there are a lot of laws around being an accredited investor, and there's a lot of technology that's trying to change the way people can participate in investing into companies. I think it's so important because when you invest in a company, you're having, yes, you have the potential for a financial upside, but you more importantly have a learning experience, because when you die, you're not taking your money with you. So what are you taking? What you've learned, how you've related to people, and how you've helped other people. And so the reality is that's what we need to focus on. And I think the view for if you're in the middle of your career and you haven't done some of these things, you're interested in venture capital, you're interested in investing, you're interested in crypto, you're interested in NFTs. I always tell people, buy one. It doesn't have to be one that's $10,000. It doesn't have to be one that's going to make you $10,000. Just buy something, even if it's $25, whatever you have to save to give yourself the opportunity to learn, do that, because that's where opportunity just continues to come. When you give yourself opportunity, you don't have to know a lot. You just have to try. And that's where I think angel investing can be a really cool opportunity to write like a $1,000 check or a $5,000 check. And from my end, I really try any chance that I get to create SPVs or things that will allow some of my friends to write their first investment check into a company. And I always say, don't look at this as your chance to make a lot of money. Look at it as your chance to make your first investment. These are the things that I think we should have on our resumes. I did this once. I tried this. I went to a cooking class to learn how to make a pizza. All these things make up who we are. And we don't give ourselves enough credit for that. But there's so much to read. There's so much to learn. And crypto is in a really interesting spot because it's starting to form itself, but it's still early days. And so I think that's a tremendous area for people to learn and kind of take some risks in making a little bit of an investment so that you can understand how crypto works and what it is.
I think that's really interesting because it kind of comes goes full circle back to how we started our discussion around this idea of just kind of like take that leap. When people talk to me about the music industry and they're like, oh, how do I get into it? And so the best and worst part about the music industry is there's no barrier to entry. If you want to be in the music industry, just write a music blog or be a
Just do it.
photographer.
Be
Just
in
do
it.
it. Which is so,
Yeah.
it's hard when people
Yeah.
expect a rule book or like, oh, well, you have to wait until this, and this, but there's no permission to be asked, especially in a decentralized lab. There's definitely no permission to be asked. That's kind of the point, right?
You know what I always say, and I think it's really timely to say it to everyone today, which is, so this morning, Billboard's Women in Music came out for this year. And I was on the list last year for the first time, and I was so fortunate to be on it again this year. And so this morning when it came out, I thought to myself, I'm on this list with all of these unbelievable women who have dedicated their entire careers to being in this industry. And I started in music only like 5 or 6 years ago. And now I'm up there with the rest of them. And it's because I just loved it. And I just dove in, and I just didn't wait for someone to give me permission. And I said, I want to do this differently. And it's funny because they have me in the finance section, but I'm in the finance section because they don't have a section for me. The section would be the future, but they don't have that. And so they always struggle with where to put me in these things. And that's like the greatest honor to me. It's not that I wish people understood. I'm comfortable that no one understands what I do or what I want to do, because that just gives me the freedom to just like keep doing fun things. And I think that that's what's so important for everyone to remember, is if you want to be in the music business, go be in it. There's no one stopping you. You could be on the top of Billboard's Women in Music in a couple years if you want. Just go do it.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent point that people don't get or figure out as quickly as they should, that you can just go do it. Okay, I think that's really interesting. I think it's really interesting space for us to kind of stay in. We talked a bit about, like everyone's looking for that magic bullet, that piece of advice that's going to like take their career to the next level. It doesn't really exist, right? So really, I think what it comes down to is kind of, I would love to kind of hear about the people that are like you, the people that have a lot of different things they're interested in, a lot of different spaces they're like going to dabble in, but they're, young and they're not ready to go out on their own and start their own company. What should they do? How should they kind of approach that? Like, do they ask for more opportunities at work? Do they start side projects? How do they kind of think about like how to shift as to what to do next?
I think the side projects are a great example. Do things with your friends. You never know. Like, a lot of people always like look to me and they're always like, oh, well, can you introduce me to like so-and-so big executive or your partner Scooter Braun or all these people? And they don't realize that all these people are successful because they're working with all of their peers. So you don't need to go up all these levels to like there's no one person that is going to change your life except for you. And a lot of people discount the people around them. And so one of the things that really made my career what it is that when I was an intern, I did side projects with the other interns that were sitting in the intern room with me. And I had this internship for a big film and TV producer named Scott Rudin. And it was like the most prolific internship to get. I was so lucky. But then once we got there were just 6 of us in a room and we did nothing. Well, literally the whole summer, we could read scripts and run errands. That's all we did. But that ended up becoming my most prolific internship because all 5 of the other people in that room with me became some of the biggest film and TV agents and producers that are in the industry. And if I need anything or wanted to call them, as we all came up together, we all just called each other and we're like, let's work on this. Let's work on this. And so people often discount the people around you to be people that can so dramatically shape your story. And I think it's interesting also to your question, or to your point before your question, around like, if you have all these ideas and you have things that you want to do, you never know in the moment why something that you come up with or you're drawn to, where it's going to be in your story, because you can't see the end when you're in the middle. And you don't see the end in the end anyway, because you die. So at the beginning, well, you go on and then you watch from there, but I didn't want that to sound morbid. But the point is, like, you just believe that everything you're doing has a purpose and is a part of your destiny. And when you look at it like that, then you can just focus in the present. And I think that's what a lot of people miss, is that they're constantly worried about, like, well, how am I going to become this huge executive? Well, you're not that huge executive today, and you don't have to be. You'll be there when you're meant to be there. Focus on today, and what can you do today to transform your knowledge, your understanding, and become more inspired. When you're in a state of inspiration, ideas are limitless, and direction is limitless, and clarity is something that you couldn't buy with gold. And that's knowing where to go next, and knowing when you put one foot before the other, then the next foot comes, and that's how you're going to move forward. And that can only come from being really, really present. And so the best reminder I would say is for everyone to wake up and think about, what can you do today that will give you a little bit more knowledge or understanding of something, because that will end up giving you your big idea.
Absolutely. I think that's probably an incredible note to end on. So I very much appreciate this. I think people
Of
don't
course.
think about talking to their peers. When they message, me or someone else, I'm like, why don't you just why don't you message the marketing manager? Why did you message the VP? The marketing manager are
Yeah.
probably going to get back to you, and the VP may or may not have time because
Yep.
everyone else messaged them as well. And I love this idea around focusing on your story, basically focusing on like what that book looks like for you, not focusing on, what's next, because at the end, just like what's happening right now and how can you make that narrative where you want to be. Do you have any final words or any kind of parting words before we close off the session?
If it's not fun, it's not right.
Love that. That's
That's
it.
simple.
That's it. It's the music industry. I swear sometimes people forget it's supposed to be fun, right?
It's supposed to be fun. We get to work in music. So if it doesn't feel fun, jump into another job or find another project to work on and make it fun.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much for your time. This was a great
Thank
session. I
you.
really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. Appreciate you having me.